Greetings everybody, Draco here, and I wanted to talk a bit about the current state of Spider-Man in comics. Now, if you aren't aware, I will give you a very quick summary of what's been happening with this character recently. In 2019, a new Spider-Man comic book series was launched, and generally speaking it was great. This is around the time they fixed one of Marvel's biggest mistakes when they decided to clear Gwen Stacy's name after years of making it seem like she cheated on Peter with Norman Osborn and had his children. They basically fixed it by saying that the whole story was a plot designed by a crazy Harry Osborn trying to mess with both Norman and Peter, ultimately confirming that Gwen never cheated on Peter to begin with. Now, through this whole story they did something I didn't particularly like, that being redeeming the character of Norman, aka the Green Goblin, by basically exorcising the evil out of him. I didn't like this because to me it seemed like a cheap way to try and make a character good, since it's not that Norman changed out of his own guilt, regrets and free will, but instead because they just took away his bad impulses from him. Which again seemed cheap. More so because previously in the series launch way back in 1963 of The Amazing Spider-Man, at least during my research it was labeled as part of that series, in its issue 700, a journey for the character Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, was started. In this journey that happened through the series named Superior Spider-Man launch in 2013 and 2019, and the Spider-Verse event, Otto basically turned over a new leaf and became a hero, even though he still was haunted by his past actions. I bring up this story because in my opinion it was a superior, pun intended, redemption story than what we got with Norman Osborn. For me, the last good story from Peter's main comics happened at the end of the Sin Eater arc, in which, as I mentioned before, they retconned the Gwen thing and basically left it in a happily ever after note. That was issue 774 from the series of The Amazing Spider-Man from 2018. After they started the whole descent into madness of Ben Reilly, excuse me here, let me rephrase that. They restarted Ben's descent into madness since, and in case you weren't aware, in the series of The Amazing Spider-Man from 2015, they already did the whole Ben turning bad thing. So regardless, at the end of the 2018 run, they basically left it in Peter is finally getting his shit together and he's permanently getting back together with Mary Jane, aka MJ. With that relatively short summary of Spider-Man's latest story, I can finally get into the amazing mess that the series of The Amazing Spider-Man from 2022 is. Just to make a long story short, Marvel decided that the only way for Peter to be a successful character is by making his life a living hell. You thought Peter and MJ were finally getting back together? Forget about that. They broke up and now MJ can barely stand the sight of Peter. Also, he's unemployed and the whole hero community hates him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We learned that Peter got attacked and transported to an alternate reality with MJ, which by the way was established at the end of the 2018 run. And in order to prevent the big bad causing all of this from achieving his goal, MJ basically sent back Peter to the original dimension. When Peter gets out, he realizes that time isn't the same in that dimension, so he has to rush through his friends and team up with Norman Osborn, that is still redeemed, air quotes on that, in order to save MJ in time. But when he finally manages to get her back, she comes back with a new guy and a couple of kids that are at least 5 to 4 years old, give or take. Make it seem like a lot of time had passed since they got separated. Then MJ learns about his team up with the Green Goblin and gets mad. This explaining why Peter's life is in its current state. Now, you might be thinking what's the problem with this? Well, besides the fact that they literally retracted the most recent stories in order to put Peter in this position solely out of a bad perception they have of what fans want. I mean, really, literally Spider-Man's life story, that was a comic in which they showed Peter's life from the 1960s all the way to the present and had Peter living a great life with his ups and downs but ultimately with a happy ending, was very successful, showing that fans don't want an unhappy Peter, but instead a Peter that finally gets his life together and is happy. But I digress. Besides that, they also, after the whole ride we went through to finally see Peter and MJ back together permanently, they decided to make MJ go completely out of character and cheat on Peter with a random mofo she just met. You might be thinking, but isn't it because maybe she spent like a decade with this new guy and gave up on Peter rescuing her? And the answer is no. As we find out, her kids weren't hers, they were a manifestation the big bad of the story was using to keep an eye on MJ, since he knew Peter would eventually come back for her. It is implied that at the very least she spent a year or 2 years with the new guy and the kids, at best. Because seeing that MJ didn't change much from the time Peter and her separated to the point Peter rescued her, it could have easily been a couple of months, which would be worse. But that doesn't even matter because, and just to put things into perspective, when the House of M story happened, Peter literally had to give up on not only a lifetime of happiness, but also his actual kids, his Uncle Ben and Gwen, in order to return reality to what it was supposed to be. Just proving that MJ is a weaker / worse person in general. Also, to make matters worse, when what happened while MJ was in the other dimension was revealed, they clearly showed that MJ never gave up on Peter, making her cheat on him even worse, because she knew that Peter would 100% come back for her, and she still did it. They can even excuse it by saying that they needed to be together in order to be the parents for the fake kids they found in this dimension, because they didn't need to be together in order to be a mother and father figure for these kids. But the final nail in the coffin was when recently, in issue 35 of the latest Amazing Spider-Man run that started in 2022, they basically stated that MJ did nothing wrong. I repeat, they are saying that this bitch that cheated on Peter, a mofo she has known for decades, with a wuss of a guy she barely even knows, wasn't wrong in any way. Like, what the actual fuck? Just let me remind you that it is clearly implied that the time MJ spent in the alternate dimension was at the very least 1 or 2 years, if we're giving her the benefit of the doubt, and that in that whole time she never doubted Peter was coming back for her. There isn't even an excuse that will justify this, because it's not like she lost her memory and couldn't remember Peter, or that she was being mind controlled or something. No, she out of her own free will decided that what she had and what she and Peter had, this more than a decade-long relationship, wasn't worth it, and they have the balls to say she didn't do anything wrong. Why? Objectively, she's wrong. There's no argument for her. To add salt to injury, the writers for whatever reason made Peter break up with Felicia, aka the Black Cat, because they clearly are making Peter available so he can take MJ back. But at no point have they wondered if they should be back together. Like, back in 2018, in the 2018 run, they also had MJ going behind Peter's back to work with a villain. That, in my opinion, was already pushing it. But then they do this whole thing, like, no, just let it die. Peter and MJ weren't meant to be together, and it is mainly because MJ is a fuck up that doesn't deserve a 5th chance at this point. Yeah, I said 5th. Because from what I know, MJ has been messing Peter's life from almost the whole time she has existed in comics. So I think maybe it is time for this to be permanent. Let Peter be happy with someone that actually cares for him and deserves him. The only good thing that came out of this recent run was watching Peter using the black suit and being an absolute menace to society. Like, I like Peter being good and all, but seeing Peter unleashing his fury is one of the most satisfying things to watch. Probably because he has gone through so much and still actively does the right thing every time. Also, a final note. What is with Marvel making MJ be unbearable? Like in Spider-Man for PS4 she was also obnoxious. Maybe they really want to kill the character, although I doubt it because, as always, Stone Deaf Marvel did something no one asked for, and they are starting an MJ comic series that I can tell you right now, no one will want to read after making MJ a selfish asshole. Which, by the way, is me saying it like this is me being kind to her. But yeah, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed the video, hope to see your thoughts in the comments, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.